This is the infamous Mark Massaro, the legendary. I'm here with my friend and co-host Michelle Bader Ebersole. Look at that, flawless.
Fourth time, and now you got it.
I got it though. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I'm really
Awesome.
good.
What's been going down? I
You
know
want
there's
to
a
know
lot
why?
going down. Yes, tell me why.
Okay, well, number one, it's sunny, which I love. Except for it's hard to be inside when it's sunny, but it's sunny, which is great. I love summer. Summer in Washington is absolutely beautiful.
Nice.
But some really, really exciting things happen. So, this happened since the last podcast. So as you know, and our listeners know, I've been talking about it for a while. I've had a nonprofit called Widow Goals, which is actually what Widowed Too Soon is under now. And it's been around a little over a year, and we've done some things in the community. The first Mother's Day I had it, we went around, my daughter Haley and I drove around and gave gifts to mothers on Mother's Day. This past year we had a tea for mothers, and then I've done, events here and there. And then we started giving scholarships for grief recovery, which is the grief group that I lead. And so I've been doing some things in the community, and I went to this event last Monday night, like a week ago, well, 2 weeks when you hear this, and it's called 100 Women Who Care. So a little bit about this organization. It started, I can't remember what city. There was a crisis in this town. There were not enough cribs, and then the babies were in people's beds, and it was just like not healthy. So they decided to get 100 women together who donated $100 to give $10,000 to buy new cribs. So that's how this organization started. So they had one here in Ridgefield where I live. So I joined, I nominated Widow Goals, and I had no idea how it worked. Like, I thought if you're nominated, you would have already known, right? But I get there, and first of all, they couldn't find my nomination. It was like a whole thing. They found, anyways, I got entered, and it was like a drawing, like a bingo wheel. They had this thing they spin, and there were 23 nominations. And it was crazy. Like, I just totally felt the favor of God, like how this all happened. So I was the third one called, and I had thankfully prepared like a couple notes really quick because the lady told me, yeah, if they call you, you have to speak. I'm like, okay, good thing I love speaking. So I made a few notes, and I was the third organization called, and I just spoke from my heart. I just said when I became a widow at age 41, it was hard to find local resources. And then I just talked about we want to bring widows together in the community. I talked about the podcast. I just talked about all these things that we do. And then they have you sit down and they're like, now it's time to vote. And so as soon as like everyone's voting, but people are coming up to me, I'm a widow, here's my card. I'm a widow, reach out to me. Like, it was crazy. There were a lot of widows there. I didn't even know that. And then we had time. So like during that time, like everyone's talking to me, and then they count them up really quick. And they were like, and the winner is Widow Goals. And I was like, what? Like, what just happened? And then they're like, now we're going to count the money, have everybody give the money. And then there's going to be more. So they gave me a check for $9,100, like one of those big fake checks. And then it's been pouring in since then. And they were like, tell us all your website. And I told them, and then bing, 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 Venmo, Venmo, Venmo. It was like my phone was like blowing up. And I was like, this is crazy. And I was like, God, where am I? Like, I just felt so like in awe of what was happening. Like, and then it was like, God, I don't even like, whoa, much is given, much is required. Now I got a big responsibility here, all of this money. But I got so excited, and so I met with my board. You guys remember Stacy Campbell-Waits from Widowed Twice? We had 2 episodes with her. She was there, and my friend Jess, which we should interview her too. I'd love to interview her. They're both widows. They're on my board. We got together the other night, and we made all these plans because we have money. And we're having a retreat, which everybody will be invited to nationwide. It's going to be sometime in October. And we're going to be able to keep the costs super low because we have money from this. And then we're also going to continue to give scholarships. And we planned out our whole year, like events every single month. Like, we're so excited to have funding and have money. So I just had to share that because I know our listeners have heard of Widow Goals and what we're doing, before. And so that was exciting. And it was like just this surreal moment. Like, I've never been handed one of those big checks. And I hadn't even invited anybody to come. Like, I didn't know I was going to speak, but we get to come back on October 30th and share everything we did. So Joel's going to come. My mom said she wants to come. And then Jess and Stacy on my board, they're going to come, and we're all going to speak about what we did with the money. And all of a sudden, all these opportunities are happening. People are reaching out to me, even wanting to. Today, somebody was like, I may want to donate to you to this thing. Tell me more about what you do. It's just like crazy. So I was totally with God,
cool.
Which allows us to continue doing this podcast. Like, it's about that too, because there are costs associated with podcasts. And so it's covering those costs right now, and we'll be able to continue to do it. So it's just exciting. That was huge.
That's awesome.
Huge. And then one other like side note thing. So I don't think I've shared this. Joel and I got invited to do this race called Hood to Coast. So it's a relay race. You start at Mount Hood, so the mountain up here in Oregon, and you go all the way to the coast, to the beach. It's a long ways. And it's, I think it's 12 runners, and you're running all through the night. So you do like 5 or 6 miles, pass it on to the next person, and you're waiting. It's just a whole thing. I've done it twice. This is my 3rd time.
That's
and
so
we're
cool.
super excited. And we just got the legs announced today, and I'm the 12th runner, which is, I was like, I want to end on the beach. I was like, I want to be the last runner and end on the beach. So I get to be that. So I'm super excited. The end of August, we get to do that. So it's been really fun, and, just life. And my son is going to go back to Washington State. He leaves next Tuesday. So we're busy, like, getting him, like, packed up again and all that stuff. And yeah, it's just kind of like a whirlwind time. And then in the meantime, like, Joel and I go exploring waterfalls and, like, go all these places whenever we have time, and just, enjoying being married for now 4.5 months and that whole world. So that's
awesome.
a lot of it about me. Let's talk about you.
Okay, well, I feel like in the future I need to go first because, like, I feel like
they're smart. No,
my life is a little boring in comparison.
It's not boring.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, definitely did not have anybody, Ed McMahon show up at my door with a big check. I'm not running any marathons, but my kids started school.
Oh, yes.
Which has been awesome.
Yes,
so Alexis had like
picture.
locker night, and we went and like did her locker, and she was just so tickled.
So cute.
It's crazy. Like, they didn't have this stuff when I was in school, but like there's like locker chandeliers, and I was like, what? Like, but Tina bought it for Alexis, which is really sweet. And then we I've seen Tina twice actually since we last recorded. I met her. We met in Kentucky for just like a day trip. Nice. And then, she came and visited last weekend, and well, it'll be last weekend for when this is aired. But anyways, we had a great time. And, it was really sweet. She wanted to get the kids some school clothes. And so that was part of what we did in Kentucky. And she's just really sweet. Just trying to work my couple of clients that I have, doing real estate and, learning a lot and stuff like that. But, I cleaned my house.
Yay. Don't you always clean?
I don't know. Yeah, I do. But I was just trying to think of something more exciting.
Yes.
Obviously visiting with Tina was really exciting. I'm just making a joke. But so I did a kickflip for her on my skateboard. Nice. She was like, yeah, you've never shown me your skateboarding moves. So, I had a pair of slippers on and did a kickflip. So felt pretty proud of that. So anyways, yeah, nothing I
just have to stop you for a minute.
Just
when
nothing
you say
compared
slippers,
to what you did.
Listen, I picture slippers, like you wear to bed slippers. But you mean like sandals that you put your feet in. Is that what you mean?
No, those are slides.
Oh, slides.
I recently learned this.
Did you actually mean slippers?
Actually meant slippers, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're like house shoes, some people call them. Like,
Okay. I got it. Just
I could do it barefoot if it didn't burn my feet on the grip tape.
Right?
Which hurts. I've done it before. You have to rub your feet along the grip tape, which is like rubbing your feet along sandpaper with the weight of your body on it. So, yeah.
Good
Nothing else I can think of to report. So yeah, it's just plugging along, right? This normal life stuff. So maybe I need to sign up for a marathon or jump out of a plane or something. I think I need to do that. Yeah, I got to show you up one of these times and be like, oh, that's nothing. Listen to what I did. No. So anyways, just to kind of segue over into today's topic. So we have a guest with us today. We have Wendy. I almost said that backwards. Wendy Robel. I almost said Randy Wobel.
You can call me Randy.
How are you doing today, Wendy?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm so very excited to be on your podcast, you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Excited
Thanks
to
for
have you.
joining us.
Absolutely.
So Wendy is obviously a widow. So as you know, all of our guests have been so far, just about all of our guests. I forgot. Michelle had one last week that was not widowed, but so why don't you tell us a little bit about your husband and, you know, what you've been through?
So I was married for 18 years, and that unfortunately ended in divorce. So a couple years later, I met Nick, and Nick was we met through Match.com, which is very scary. Online dating. I'll talk about that a little more again later, but we did come across each other on Match, and happened to live about 10 minutes from each other, and so we met in October. Our first date and first meeting was in October of 2019, and we met at a little pub that had a dartboard, and so we just had a really casual dinner, and then we played a couple rounds of darts, which I'd never played before in my life, and it was just like immediate connection, immediate. And I had dated a little bit before I met Nick, but he was so easy to talk to. He was hilarious, just matched my sense of humor, which is also a little scary. But we just got along so naturally and so well, and I was just blown away. And a little bit later, a few days later, he told me, you know, I had a couple other first dates lined up, because he said, I've been alone long enough. I want to meet somebody, you know, I want to meet the one. He said, so I've been like aggressively setting up first dates. And he said, I had a couple more set up for that weekend that we met. We met on a Friday evening. And he said, and I canceled all of them, because he was like, there was nothing. He was like, it was just, you know, our date was absolutely fantastic. So, you know, we dated for about a year, and then we got married in October of 2020. Very, very tiny wedding, because it was like right in the middle of the COVID thing. But we got married in his dad's family room. But it was also a second marriage for him. And in March, fast forward to March of 2021, he started having some weird symptoms and got tested for COVID, and it was negative. And finally he's like, I'm just going to go you know, very anti-doctor kind of a guy, but he's like, I'm going to go figure out what this is and get it taken care of. And it ended up being stage 4 liver cancer. And so 5 months after the diagnosis, he went to be with Jesus. And so it was it was a whirlwind relationship. By the time he passed, we had not even known each other for 2 full years. Wow. So my situation is probably quite a bit different than a lot of widows, where we did not have a long marriage at all. I mean, 5 months. And, you know, we planned to be camping and taking our girls on trips, and we had things planned out until we were like 80. And so we were so excited. We were just so pumped and happy that, you know, our paths had crossed, and then gone, just done. And it was like a punch in the gut that you never expect, you know, like, this isn't the kind of thing that ever was supposed to happen to me. This happens to other people.
Right.
And boom, you're right there in it. And yeah, I mean, it was such an extraordinary experience, and just so unusual. And you know, he passed away at 48, and it just, when I tell people, they still just are speechless. You know, that we were married 5 months, and then he passed away. We didn't even get a year We didn't even get half a year, you know? And so that's, I think, what makes my particular story a little bit unusual. I know many women, many widows who were married, widows and widowers who were married for several years, you know, and left, and then their spouse passed. And I don't think that one situation is harder than the other, but I think they must be very different. When you're with someone and you see them every day for like 25 years, and then you lose them, how different does that feel than when you're with someone for, you know, not even 2 years, and then they leave you? I don't know. I mean, we had that excitement and the newness, and just we were so just amped about starting our lives together, and forming this new little family with my daughter and his daughter. And so we had that element, I guess that element of newness still, when this bomb dropped, you know. So that is the story in a nutshell.
Thank you for opening up and sharing that. What was it like? Let's go back a little bit. Like when you first got the diagnosis, how did he take it? How did you take it? What was that like for you?
So he took it way better than I did. He was way more positive than I was. He is more hopeful than I was. Obviously he was very, very scared, and more than anything, he was very angry. But, for example, the day that he told me that they found immeasurable tumors on his liver, I was at work. I worked as a cake decorator in a bakery, and he called me, and I knew he was at the doctor. You know, he was kind of keeping me updated, and he called, and I could tell he was crying, and this was also the kind of man that didn't really cry. So I knew it must have been pretty bad. And he goes, "Hi, sweetie," and his voice was shaky, and I was like, I reached in my purse for Altoids, because whenever I need soothing, I have to eat Altoids. I don't know why, they just soothe me. They calm my nerves just a tiny bit. So I was digging in my purse for an Altoid. I'm like, okay, what did they say? He said they did a CT scan and there's immeasurable tumors on my liver. And I said, well, that doesn't mean anything. We don't know yet. Could be anything. And he's like, well, the doctor told me that he's never seen a case of this many tumors where it was not end-stage cancer. And so, yeah. So that day the day he found out, he did not take it well at all. And he just cried and kept hugging me, and he kept apologizing to me. I'm so sorry. You know, we're just getting started. I am so sorry. And I said, please stop apologizing. I said, that's absurd. You never in a million years would have asked for this. We had no clue. You know, all he had was a weird pain in his right side that went kind of up to his shoulder. That was it. That was what brought him to the doctor to say, what is this from? And so, but after that initial day, the day that we found out, he was a lot more calm than I was. And I went to his first oncologist appointment with him. And I'm a very mild-mannered person. It takes a lot to get me upset or angry. Like, it takes a lot for me to demonstrate anger. But the oncologist walked into the room, and I stood up, and I blocked him from Nick, and I pointed at him, and I said, how does a 48-year-old perfectly healthy man get cancer? And Nick was like, okay, sit down. And I sat down and I said, we lived in Wisconsin at the time, and there are two like not competing, but two very large hospitals in that area. And I asked him about the cancer survival rates of the other hospital. And he's like, we don't know. We don't know enough about Nick's particular case. And I grabbed Nick's arm. I'm like, we're going to the other one. And I needed to blame someone. And that poor doctor at that time was the person I was blaming because he was a cancer doctor. So just all kinds of crazy emotions. And once I went back to work, I took a couple days off work. And once I went back, I just, I was trying to decorate cakes, and I was just throwing spatulas across the floor, and I was so angry, and I didn't know where to go with that anger. And Nick was not, he was angry and confused, but he was not demonstrating it like I was. And that is extremely uncharacteristic for me, to do things like that, to throw things and yell at doctors. And so, I acted out a bit, whereas he was, at the beginning, rather calm. We kind of flip-flopped. At the beginning, he was calm, and towards the end, he got very angry and would say things like, I did not ask for this, I don't want this, I want to watch my daughter grow up, because she was only 14 at the time. And I kind of did the opposite. I was super angry at the beginning, and it very slowly, that anger started to subside into just plain anticipatory grief.
Right.
So it was interesting the way that we both responded. And it would change from day to day and sometimes minute to minute, and we didn't know how long he had. So the prognosis was a year to 18 months if he did chemo, and without chemo about 6 months. And he did do 7 rounds of chemo, but it's still, he only made it 5 months. So the prognosis, that they give you is always just an estimate. They don't know. I mean, they know in general, but
no, they really don't. There's no way for them to know that.
Exactly.
So I know what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, were you able to be with him when he passed away?
I was not. He didn't want me to be. He didn't want anybody to be with him when he passed. He did not. He didn't like showing weakness. But I'm sorry, when you have stage 4 cancer, you have no choice. But he didn't. He passed away at the hospice center, and it was 3:45 in the morning. So as so often happens, he passed in the middle of the night, and I got a phone call right afterwards, and the hospice center said, he passed. And so then his dad and I met up and went from there. But no, he did not want us to be at his bedside, and I was fine with that because I didn't really want to watch him pass. So no one was with him when he passed, and he had been very highly medicated with morphine for about 6 days at that point, and he slept for the last 4 days of it. So it's not like he was like, nobody's with me. He didn't know. He had no idea. So
Yeah.
Walk
Wow,
us
that's
through
intense.
those first few days. The first day for me was a lot of shock, even though it was coming. Just all the emotions. What was it like for you in the beginning?
The very, very first feeling that I felt when I got the phone call that he had passed was relief. And that sometimes sounds very absurd when I tell people that, but he had suffered so profoundly in that 5 months between the chemo and the cancer itself. He had suffered so much, and I literally think I just like exhaled, and I was like, okay, God, he's with you.
Yep.
You know, now he's in perfection, and he's got a brand new body, and but after that relief passed, it was, like you said, definitely shock, even though I knew it was coming.
Right.
And I have struggled almost my entire life with anxiety on and off, and my anxiety was I couldn't eat. I had to drink like those shakes, just protein shakes. Yes, that's exactly what they were in, sure. And so I lived on those for a few weeks, and I guess the worst part of the couple of weeks after he passed was being in our home without him. I hated being there. I didn't want to sleep there. I didn't want to sit in the family room without him. And that was an absolutely horrible feeling. And we didn't know many people in that area. So I didn't really we had just moved to that townhome because we had to sell our house right after he was diagnosed, and we moved into a rental townhome, and we didn't know any neighbors yet. And so I didn't have anyone to just go to when I felt like I was going to crawl out of my skin, you know? And so incredibly lonely. So lonely I didn't know a person could feel that lonely. And my family was very much there for me, but I'm actually talking like after the funeral. And then I went to spend 2 weeks with my family. And then after I got home from that, there I was alone again. And it was awful. I don't even know how to explain it. Just lonely, devastated. Lonely is the biggest word I can come up with.
Yeah.
And so if I would have had more people to reach out to and say, hey, can you just come sit with me? I don't need you to even say anything. I just need your presence with me. But I didn't really have that because we hadn't lived in that area very long. So it was really an awful mix of extremely intense emotions, and definitely the biggest feeling for me was loneliness and complete despair.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, I relate to a lot of that stuff you're talking about. Even going all the way back to when you were saying you were angry with the oncologist because you needed somebody to be angry at, and I really remember that feeling. And yeah, even when you have the anticipatory grief, there's not much that can prepare you for what it's going to actually feel like when they're gone.
Exactly.
But I also, and I don't think a lot of people would really understand this unless they were either close to the person that died or they've been through this. But I totally understand what you're saying, the sense of relief. Because it is horrible to watch somebody suffer. My wife suffered greatly also, and it was just the most inexplicable thing. You just can't explain it to somebody. And actually, I was having a conversation with Tina when she was here, and it was weird. Like, I was talking about Lacey and what she went through and what I watched, and I lost it, and I was like bawling to her. Like, I haven't cried like that since Lacey died. I could hardly talk. I was just a groveling mess, and but there is a extreme, intense sense of relief when it's finally over, and you know that you're not going to hear them suffering and pain anymore. And it doesn't mean that you don't miss them or that this isn't horrible, but just knowing like you can breathe this sigh of relief that like, okay. And like you said, I really think that is a gift to believers, because we always have that, like, oh, you're with him. Like, I remember that was the first thought that went through when I saw my wife and she was gone. of course, there was like this, oh my gosh, and my eyes just started filling up with tears. But the first real thought I had was, whoa, you're with him now. And so, anyways, yeah, it is. I just wanted you to know you're not alone in that. That's a very, very common feeling for people who've watched their spouse suffer.
Yeah.
It's very different from the instant finding out they died in a car accident or something
Absolutely.
like that. It's very, very different. There's obviously no relief for that. And so for those of you listening who did not lose your spouse to cancer or illness or some COVID, something drawn out, don't think we're weird. This is something that we've watched somebody suffer for a long time that you love and adore, and watching them fall apart is horrendous.
Oh my gosh.
So, but I'm sorry, Michelle, did I cut you off? Were you about to ask another question?
I think we just both had questions or wanted to say something at the same time. So, Wendy, I've followed your journey here and there for the last year or I don't know, long time, and I've seen that you are not still in that place that you were in the very beginning. And so
I'm not.
So what was it that helped you get out of that and find your joy? Because I see a lot of really smiling posts and funny posts and how did you get to where you are now?
The joy of the Lord.
Amen.
And I am gonna cry in this one.
That's okay.
I do not know, like you said, Mark, how we as believers it's everything. How do people that don't believe and don't know Jesus, where does their hope come from,
Yeah.
I cannot even begin to imagine that. And God has just been so good. And He's provided so much. I've seen Him working in my life and blessing me so specifically
That's amazing.
since Nick's diagnosis. Not even since he passed, but since he was diagnosed, Never in my life, I'm currently 48, never in my 48 years have I seen such specific blessings from Him. And it's been so amazing. And He just deserves all the glory because He has gotten me in so many specific ways to where I am now. And I do have quite a sense of humor, and that was completely just shut down for a long time, obviously. And then slowly but surely I started to laugh again and make other people laugh again, and I love that. Laughing feels so good after grief, during grief. The other night I was just hanging out with my daughter and some friends, laughing so hard I could not breathe. And I just was thinking, this feels so darn good. And to be a little more specific, when Nick passed, I had a really hard time even not only being in our home without him, but being in our town without him. Because everywhere I looked, I saw him, And so... One thing that I did that I've heard counselors advise against is I made a decision to move. And I moved an hour and a half north. So I'm still in Wisconsin, but I'm way up north, closer to the Green Bay area now. And I have met so many precious people and been blessed with great, work. And now I'm a teacher's aide for middle schoolers and just cannot wait for the new school year to start. Those kids are just fantastic. And this cat right here has been my comfort cat big time. That's David. And so moving an hour and a half away has been massively healing for me. Some people, I completely understand if that would not be a good decision, but for me it was. And I also didn't shut people out. I never really got silent. I love sharing my story. I love telling people details. I love telling people how amazing God has been. And so I just literally, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And he has, so 2 years ago tomorrow is when Nick died.
Oh, wow.
And it's, first of all, I can't believe it's been 2 years. It feels like about 3 weeks ago. But it's just, I've made pretty specific decisions and choices that have led to my healing. And Mark, you said the other day that you just started sobbing like a baby, and that absolutely still happens to me too. There will be one little tiny thing that triggers it, and I'm just a puddle on the floor. You know, it doesn't, that sadness and grief does not go away, ever. But you do learn to live your life around it. And you learn to, my personal mission is to help people understand that when you lose a spouse, it sucks. It's horrible. It's unbearable. But it does get better. It doesn't always feel so raw. It really does get better.
I want people to hear that too. Like, for those of you in the beginning, we know there's a lot of you listening that this is a very new life to you. I think what she said is really important for you to understand. I'm going to word it a little differently, but grief is not something you get over. It's something you learn to live with. And but also that's a great example of what Michelle and I have said in several episodes, is that it's not just time, it's what you do with the time. And if you're proactively searching for your healing and leaning on the Lord, and doing all the things, and signing up for grief counseling with Michelle, just different things like that. But if you're actively reading books, listening to podcasts, I mean, obviously you're listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
But you're doing these things. You're on the right track. Or YouTube. Sorry. Shout out to our sponsor, YouTube. No. But you're constantly pursuing your healing, and we actually did an episode a long time ago called "Pursuing the Positive Emotions."
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And that was way back. Yeah, that was way back. And so it is, as much as it is out of your control, it is very much in your control, what you do with it, and your outlook, your perspective, your decisions you make. And Michelle and I also went against the grain and moved away. Michelle moved to a different part of Washington to be closer with her family. I moved from Southern California to East Tennessee, not really knowing anybody here. So, but for the same reason as you, I needed a new life. I just everywhere I looked was Lacey. Everywhere I looked was something that made me sad, something that brought me down. And I wasn't one of the big mistakes I made that I've often said on here is I was not the type to share with people because I felt like I was going to bring them down. And so that was a mistake I made. And so I dealt with a lot of things internally in my head, which I don't recommend. Talk to people about it and stuff. But anyways, but I just wanted people in the beginning to focus and understand that you're not going to get over it. You're going to learn to live with it. And then you're going to be okay once you learn to live with it. And yes, the grief still comes. And I remember a long time ago you explained grief coming in waves, like being in the ocean.
Yeah, I wanted to
because you did a good job explaining that.
And I do want to just disagree just a little bit, mostly because what I do is called grief recovery, and like I do believe you can recover from grief. I believe we will always miss them, and we will still have waves here and there. But I think it's just that we're saying the same thing in different ways. Like you can continue and have a full life and recover from where you were in the beginning, but we will still always miss them. And in grief recovery, we talk about, let's say there's a flat tire. You get a flat tire and you sit there and you're like, in a year, it'll be full if I just wait. But if you don't take the action to put the air in there, it's not going to fill up, and we're not going to be anywhere different. So it's the same thing. Like, I didn't get it in the beginning, like, because I was like,
Perfect.
I did really well, and I didn't understand why people didn't. And then when I learned in grief recovery, no, it's what you do with the time. I would meet widows 10 years out, and they'd be in the same place, and I'd be like, I'm so sad. It's never going to get better. Like, what?
Right,
and so,
right.
I believe you have the same mission that we do, is to always be like, it's going to get better with the steps, you take towards recovery. And that's my main mission, is because when I became a widow, I knew 7 widows. Somehow God had already placed all these widows in my life. I called every single one of them and said, does it get better? And they all told me yes. And so that's my mission.
Aww,
is like,
that's awesome.
I want people to know, because it was so difficult during those first days.
Yes.
And so, I'm so happy to see where you are, where God has taken you. Were there any like specific verses or songs that helped you through this time period?
Oh, yes. So there's a song by Casting Crowns, Scars in Heaven.
Oh, I love that one.
And that song just brings me to my knees, because it talks about how the only scars in heaven are on the hands that hold you now.
Ooh, so good.
They're so good.
Good.
And it just talks about how in heaven you are just made perfect. You have a new body. You are in complete perfection, and you are in the presence of God every minute of every day for the rest of eternity, and that is just such a comfort to me. So that song was huge. And so Isaiah 61, starting in verse 3, is now my life verse. It talks about how God brings beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, and peace for despair.
So good.
And so, Isaiah 61, starting in verse 3, because he really does. There are a couple versions. There are a couple different songs called Beauty for Ashes, and those are also, they go right along with the passage from Isaiah.
I love that
and
song.
He does do all those things. Those are 4 specific things, and he does ultimately bring beauty from ashes. He brings, look what he did, Michelle. He brought this podcast.
Yeah.
From you losing your beloved husband, he brought Mark into this podcast. The 2 of you are helping people so much, and I just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And your other ministries, Michelle, just look what he's doing through such an awful thing,
Right.
Yeah, we never know how he's working, and it's so interesting.
Right.
It's something we've talked about a lot on here before, that like we see our life in a very linear fashion. We can just see what's right in front of us, but God is in the 4th dimension, essentially, looking at our whole life that's already beginning to end. He sees the whole thing. And so there's a lot of times where we feel like our life is falling apart, but he's setting the stage for something else. And I mean, that's where faith comes in. That's why it's such a gift that we can give to the Lord, is our faith, because we have to believe. And even though I know that's not directly what the Jeremiah 29:11 verse means, but that he does have a plan for our life. He was talking to a specific group of people at that time and whatever, but but it's true. He does have a specific outline for our life if we will be obedient to him. There's blessings in our life. And I've had the tremendous blessing, not only helping people, that feels tremendous that Michelle and I are able to help people, but this is how I met Tina. She's a listener. She's also widowed.
That's
And
crazy. That's
I
so
wouldn't
cool.
have met her. And then the Lord
See?
was leading me to Tennessee. And
Yeah.
I moved from Southern California to 4.5 hours away from Tina. So we are doing long distance, but I wouldn't even have considered it if I lived in
Sure.
Southern California.
Okay.
It's only because it was driving. I mean, we can go 2.5 hours each and we meet each other in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And we do that as often as we can. So anyways, it is
Yep.
interesting how the Lord does, they say the Lord works in mysterious ways, right? And
Yeah, for real. No,
so
absolutely.
it's, maybe God entrusts us with difficult situations, or maybe God knows that it's going to help shape us into the Christ-like image that he wants us to be like, that we pray to
Right.
be like. And so
Right.
he might give us scenarios in which, to change and benefit ourselves, to be more like him. But anyways, so
Awesome
yeah.
thoughts. Yes, I absolutely agree with everything you just said. And that is,
So
it's
what-
amazing how he works.
Yes. So, what is the most challenging thing for you about being widowed?
Let's see. I was thinking about this earlier today, and I would say for me, the most challenging thing at the point that I'm at right now, almost exactly 2 years out, is I wish that I could just call Nick for 5 minutes and just say, look, I think you'd be proud of me. This is what's going on. Because I don't know if God gives people glimpses of their loved ones from heaven. I have no idea. My guess is no, but I don't know. So many things happen that I just wish I could be like, because he was the one I told everything to, like everything. And I still wish that I could tell not just anybody, but specifically Nick, because I know he'd be excited, and he'd probably crack some snarky joke, about what's going on in my life right now and stuff. And I just wish that I could just give him a little update, like, hey,
Yeah.
first of all, I'm doing okay. My life is drastically different now, and I think you'd be proud of me. And I miss being able to talk to him.
Yeah.
So that's for
Well,
me
if I
at
could
this
give you
point, that's the
some,
hardest.
sorry, if I could give you a small piece of advice, remember that we can ask for anything in Jesus' name. I often pray with my kids, and I ask
Yeah.
God in the name of Jesus to share my words with Lacey. I don't know how that works. I know we do. Michelle and I have talked about this. We do know that people in heaven have some idea of what's going on earth. We don't know the extent of that. But I like to believe in my heart that if I ask faithfully in Jesus' name, and I just start saying what I want to say to Lacey, or my kids start saying what they want to say to mommy, we feel like those messages are being delivered. And I don't think there's anything anti-biblical about that. If anybody in the audience, please correct me if I'm wrong, if there is something I'm doing wrong there. But because I'm not talking directly to her or anything like that, but I understand what you mean. Yeah, it's like
Right.
you just want them to know. And actually, so he went home on August 10th, 2021. Is that right?
It was August 9.
9,
Literally
okay.
like 3:45 this coming morning would be
Oh,
the
so
exact
it's tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said in 2 days. I'm sorry. Actually, so for me, it's in 5 days.
Oh,
Lacey went home August
wow.
13th, 2020.
Okay. Mhm.
So yeah, that's another thing. I like to write Lacey letters on Facebook. So that's something you can do too to feel like you're communicating. But
And I
sorry, go
think
ahead, Michelle.
We've talked about this before, that and this is what I teach my kids, like, that, there's a great cloud of witnesses in heaven. So
Yeah.
people have gone before us, and that their dad can see the happy things on earth, like, he can't see sadness in heaven, and so I
Correct.
believe he's there. And we have had like the weirdest things happen. Like whenever we take a picture and then there's like light shining down on it, since the beginning started happening right after Luke died. I'm like, I feel like that's not Daddy, but that's God saying Daddy sees this, and it happens like on every big moment. It's so weird. I just took a picture.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I just took a picture of my youngest. Oh, that's another thing I didn't talk about. My youngest got his permit. Crazy.
Wow.
I took a picture and I showed him, and it was the light, like the sun. I'm like, I believe Daddy's seen that. And when my daughter just got her license, same thing. I mean, it's just like we have too many things that I'm like, oh, 'cause
Sure.
you can't see the sun in the picture, right? But then you take it and there's a streak right down it. And
Yeah,
it's
like a
happened in so
ray
many
of
things.
light.
Yeah. That we're always like, I
hear
believe
ya.
Daddy sees this. And
That's
so I
super
believe,
cool.
Yeah, that they can
It's
see
amazingly
the-
cool.
Yeah.
I
think they
really
can
love
see.
both of your perspectives on that, and
Thank you.
asking God to deliver a message, and you know,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
the other day my daughter and I were walking outside, and probably the biggest dragonfly I've ever seen. He was a good probably 4 inches long, and he was metallic blue. And it was sunny, and he was literally like sparkling, and this dragonfly just flew right past us. Not just like,
Wow.
in front of us. It was like a foot in front of us. And we both said, "Hi, Nick." So I do feel like, hey, there's some kind of like acknowledgement from him of this moment. So I totally, and it brings such joy, you know, when things like that happen.
Yeah.
And whether or not we're right or wrong about these things, like, I don't know
Yeah,
if God's
yeah, yeah.
actually sharing my words with Lacey, but it brings
Exactly.
me peace, and I enjoy it. It brings my kids
Exactly.
peace.
Yes, that's
It's
that's
cute.
priceless.
My little boy Luke, just the other day, he's like, "Daddy, did you know angels are real?" I was like, "Yeah, I knew that." You know, and he's like, "What are they like?" And I was like, "Oh, let's talk." You know, it was really neat.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So, Wendy, just a few more questions. So, what are your thoughts about dating again, or have you dated, and how has that been for you? Or
I've
your
dated
thoughts?
quite a bit. So I feel like after someone loses a spouse through divorce or through death, I think some women, there's 2 types of women. This is my philosophy. There's the kind that says, I'm done with men. And then there's the kind that says, I don't want to live the rest of my life without a mate,
Yep.
without my person.
Yeah.
And I'm very much that second kind of woman. So I have dated on my website, on my author website, I have a blog. And on one of those blogs, I write about dating being like, especially online dating, being like, I kind of equate it to looking for just the right kind of sweater. Like, you've got the kind of sweater in mind that you want, the colors, the size, you've got everything figured out, and you're looking for it, and you hope it exists, but you go to Goodwill and you look through, 30 racks of tops, shirts, and maybe that time that you're at Goodwill, you don't find anything. But at least you looked, And then you go a few weeks later and you're looking for that same sweater. Maybe it's here now, And you go, and sometimes you find a sweater that's acceptable, but not just the right one. And then if you're really, if the Lord wills it, you find your dream sweater and it fits perfectly. And it's, it's got a few strings here and there, but you can fix those. But yeah, I kind of like that analogy, and
Good.
so yeah, I am now dating someone that I believe is my sweater,
Yay.
and
Nice.
it's taken a while to weed through the racks, but sure enough, he came into my life just about 3 months ago, and yeah, and it just, he understands. I think, Michelle, one time I thought that I heard you say, it's hard to date a widow, or someone you heard that, and then
Somebody commented that on one of
People
our
have
YouTube
said that.
videos.
Oh,
yeah,
they
like
did.
it's hard to date a widow, or a widower, and I can understand that. I think that it would be very hard if the shoe was on the other foot, but the man that I'm dating is so incredibly accepting of it, and he read my book and gave me feedback and just was like, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine what you went through, and you know, you were definitely Nick's angel that he needed to walk through that cancer with him. And you know, he's so, and some people would be like, stop talking about, you know, stop talking about your spouse that passed, that's enough, get over it. He's not like that at all. He's so understanding and so sensitive and just wonderful. So,
That's amazing.
That's great.
So happy for you.
thank you. Well, and I'm happy for both of you too. Incredibly happy.
Thank
you.
So,
Yeah, I found a
just
Gucci suit
know-
at the thrift store.
see? So, yeah. And Michelle, you know, with Joel, just, it's just amazing.
A pilot suit. A pilot.
There you go.
I found the
Yes.
best,
You
like,
found
gold
Captain
suits.
America.
Captain America. Woo!
I found the best of the best. So yeah.
I
he
love,
really is.
I love that analogy for you guys too. A Gucci suit,
Yes.
pilot
Yes.
suit. That's so
I'm
great.
so happy for you. And speaking
So-
of, finish your thought. And then
I
have
was just
something
going to say, for those listening too, just know that you can love again.
Yes.
There's no limit on love, and you can, that the person that you end up loving after you became a widow or widower is not going to be the person that you lost. There's going to be a lot of differences in personality and just so many differences. But just, you know, I say get out there, and if you have any desire to date again, yes, you need some time to heal and you don't need to jump right out there, but eventually when you feel like God has you ready, I very much would encourage people to get out there. Just get out there. Meet people, and you never know, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we
so-
spend all this time learning how to love in our marriages.
And
You don't forget how to
exactly.
do that. You
That's
just continue
exactly right.
growing in your ability to love, and
Yep.
you also have this really deep appreciation for life.
Yeah.
You don't take things for granted. You feel
take
so much
every
more willing
moment.
to yeah, so much more willing to like not argue about small stuff, and just
Oh
to
my
like let
gosh,
things go. As
totally.
soon as you like remember, you're like, oh yeah, like I know what can happen in life, and it's like
Yes.
let's not waste time on this or whatever,
You're pretty
whatever
much
it might be.
expert level, so don't waste that. Yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree. Yep, that
was
is so
one of
true.
the first things that Joel said that he liked about me is that I like had a whole different perspective on life than anybody he knew. Like that I didn't take things for granted and just enjoy every
Sure.
moment and all of that
Yep.
stuff. And I want
Amen.
to tell everybody to
Yes.
not settle for a sweater that doesn't accept your late spouse. Your
Yeah,
last
oh,
sweater, I guess, in that-
absolutely.
like, they can't accept that you're still going to have pictures of your last sweater. You're going to talk about your last sweater. You still love your last sweater. You don't need that
Yep.
sweater. Boom.
Yeah,
That's
you're gonna
right.
find out that sweater's unraveling in the back.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to come all
Exactly,
apart.
yes.
That was so
Yes.
great. So, Wendy, I wanted to talk about your book because you mentioned your book earlier, and I know you wrote one. So could you tell us and tell the audience a little bit about what is your book, what's it about, and of course we'll put links to where everybody can find it. So we'd love to hear more about
Absolutely. So when I knew that I wanted to write a book the day that Nick was diagnosed, because I'd been wanting to write a book for probably since high school. And so the day that he was diagnosed, and we found out, the bottom dropped out of our world, I was like, well, this is finally it. This is what I'm going to write a book about. Because I had dabbled, I'd started books and nothing came of them. So I actually started documenting things like journal entries, texts to and from friends that reached out, and Caring Bridge posts, that I would put on the Caring Bridge website with updates, and because I knew that I wanted to save those because I knew that they would be part of my book. Because we can all talk about what it was like and what it's like now, but nothing conveys the real rawness of the experience like your thoughts as it's happening. Right. And so a lot of my book, probably the whole second half of my book is word for word excerpts that I wrote as it was happening. You know, things like, I wish that cancer had a face so I could just sock it in the nose over and over and over again. You know, just whatever was on my mind came out. And my book, it's called Their Wings Caught the Sun, because of Nick's love for dragonflies and his fascination with how their wings just reflected the sun and they would just shine. And for a macho guy, it was kind of cool. I loved his fascination with dragonflies. So it's called Their Wings Caught the Sun. And the first half is about how we met. It's got some funny stories, camping stories, stories about how, you know, on our honeymoon, which is basically just a weekend camping trip, he had told me that the few little coarse hairs that would grow out of my chin, he could kind of feel those when we were kissing. And he said, if you want, I can get you, I'll pay for an appointment at a, whatever those people are called that remove hairs permanently. And I was like, you chose our honeymoon to talk about my chin hairs. And it's just, you know, there were, that's just one example. But, you know, there's just some funny stories. So first you laugh, and then the diagnosis comes, and then you know, what I like to say about my book is something that I heard on, I think, the Today Show, talking about a different book. The guy said, the book reviewer said, this book breaks your heart and then puts it back together again. And that's kind of, I was like, oh my gosh, that's my book to a T.
Good. Yeah.
So it just comes full circle about our whirlwind, super short relationship story and what happened and how we dealt with it. And the last chapter talks about just my advice. Having gone through it, having walked through it, this is the advice that I am giving to you. Basically, God is good, and it will not always feel like this.
That's awesome.
So it's a great book. Oh, there's also art pages in it. For every chapter, I did an art page. So there's 16 chapters and 16 art pages. And they are, now I'm not a talented artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I just did like doodles, creative lettering, quotes, Bible verses, just with watercolor paint and markers. And I love how those art pages they're very powerful. They just make everything kind of feel a little more real. So I think the art pages make it incredibly engaging too. So, and I've had people say once I started, I couldn't put it down, you know, and I've gotten some phenomenal feedback, and I hope and pray this is my first book of more. I'm not sure what future books would be about, but this one is my baby, and it's a memoir to Nick and what God did through him and through our story.
Nice. So we can find that awesome. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and your website. Is that right? What's your website?
Yep. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And then, so the publisher that published my book is called Westbow Press. And basically, if you go to my author site, which is simply wendyrobel.com, you will see just kind of a synopsis of the book. You'll see some photos, and then you'll see, if you click on the menu, I think it says buy the book. and then you click on that, and you can purchase the soft cover, the hardcover, or the ebook. And I would love to make an audiobook. I would love to read it as an audiobook. I just don't know what all is involved in that.
I did that for my book, Cancer Can't Crush Us, so we can talk some other time. And I did it all myself and got it up.
Do that.
So it's on Amazon.
No.
It's on Audible. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I taught myself.
I am
so
going
I can
to
teach
read
you.
that. Listen to that. Okay. That's amazing. I would love to connect about that.
Yes,
That'd be phenomenal.
Yes, I've written several books too. In fact, Mark and I have started a book, but we
oh,
have
yay!
a couple chapters, and we're going to call it "Widow Too Soon." So, yeah,
That's
that will come out
fantastic.
when we have time to work on it.
Yeah, like you guys don't have anything else going on, so you know.
Yeah, I did start a book a long time ago called Widow Goals, and I do have the entire book. I did all the outline, all the things. I went through with Proverbs 31 Ministry. They chose 100 people, and I was one of them to go through their boot camp. And then they chose one person to get published. It wasn't me, but I learned a lot. I have the whole book proposal boot camp. That's what it was called. I have the whole book proposal, but then when I met Mark, we added his writing into it, and I think it's really good having both perspectives. So that is one of our dreams to finish that. We will. At some
Okay,
point.
so that
goals.
Yeah, it's one of our goals.
yes.
Anyways,
that is fantastic. Keep going with that because I want to read it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. You've shared so much insight, and I know you're going to be such an inspiration to people to see where you're at. Talking about where you were and then where you are now and just your perspective. And I love one thing that I'm really taking away from this is how you give God all the glory. You're like, it's totally God. Like, He is
absolutely
why
100%
I am where I am. And that's just so refreshing to hear that is why you are where you are. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Mark, did you have any more questions?
No, that was wonderful though. Thank you very much for sharing your story. It's a very touching story.
Of course. It was absolutely my honor, and I just can't thank you both enough for reaching out and having me as a guest on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank
And you guys are so inspiring to me as well.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
of course.
Mark, would you like to pray?
Sure, yes. Lord, thank you so much for the many opportunities and responsibilities that you've given to us. Thank you for blessing Michelle's ministry, Widow Goals, with just such a beautiful blessing that I know is going to help so many people. And Lord, I'd just like to thank you for Wendy and her outlook and perspective and for sharing it with us and all of our listeners. And I pray that it would bless many. Gosh, you're such a good God. Thank you so much for helping us to see when we can't see and to helping us to feel again when we can't feel. And you just are there for us whether we see it or not. And we're so grateful for you and your faithfulness. Yes, thank you, Lord. And Lord, I'd like to pray for Wendy specifically, Lord, that you continue to bless her with healing in her heart and that her new sweater just continues to be the greatest sweater. And so I'd like to pray over that, Lord, and just that your blessing and your hand is upon it. And praying for all those listening, Lord, that they really feel like they can also do this, that they can also find their own recovery story. And we just thank you for all the blessings, and it's in Jesus' name we pray to you, Father. Amen.
Amen. Well, if you liked this podcast, give us a little bing, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. If you have another second, if you want to review it, that would be awesome. It helps get the word out. And like I talked about last time, we are part of Widow Goals now. There's a link in the description if this ministry has blessed you and you want to give back to it. And if you want to be a guest or you want prayer or anything, reach out to us at widowedtoosoon at widowgoals.org, Facebook, all the places. Just look for Widow Too Soon and you'll find us. And I think that's all we have for this week. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye.